Hi, this is Solarman on Solarman Life. These are the three things that is very important. Let me just summarize again. Be happy, be curious, and also be imaginate. Be imaginative. All right. The next four are being purposeful or full of purpose. Now, this if the all the 7 points, this is probably the most important point. Largely because the other deals with how, but purpose deals with the why. All right. Now, being purposeful means that you need to really spend a lot of time and to think through, and just maybe you want to travel to India or you travel the world, to think through the basic issue of what your life is all about. And you find the overarching purpose, and you stick to your purpose once you found that. Now, being purposeful is, I call that finding your calling in life. All right. So I'm a Christian, so I always believe there is a calling of God to me in my life. Just like the Apostle Paul, if you read every one of his epistle, he always starts with stating his purpose, which is preaching the gospel to the Gentile, and he then go on to define what the gospel is, right? So almost every book is like that, and so that overarching purpose, which is defined in terms of preaching the gospel to the Gentile, dictates his whole life, and that's his own purpose, and he would not let other things to deviate him from that singular purpose. He traveled the world for that purpose. So for me, my purpose is to help people live a comfortable but sustainable life through my invention. So that's my overarching purpose, right? So that defines something that you really have to develop an intense desire to fulfill that purpose. Now, purposes are basically projecting yourself maybe 10 years. In my case, I'm talking about 30 years at most. When I formulated this purpose, I have maybe 30 years to really totally fulfill this purpose. So I think it's extremely important for this generation to really think through what the life is all about, define a purpose, and let that purpose drive your activity. It makes you happy. People who are active are happy, but people who find meaning in life through defining a purpose is what makes them happy. All right, so it's something that you really need to go through and test out things that, that's not what I enjoy, and that's not really meaningful. It's not just a matter of enjoyment, because you can play video game and enjoy it a lot, but that's not a purpose in that. But, so you really have to really think through that, talk to people, and then elaborate what your overarching purpose is. Now, when I say overarching purpose, you should be able to state your purpose in your life in a very simple, like I did, to help people live a comfortable but sustainable life. That's my overarching purpose in my life. So now that, after you have defined that, then I call it overarching purposes. Then you would say, okay, then I have other purposes which are derived from that overarching purpose. For example, I would focus on energy, I would focus on the environment, and also I focus on education, the 3 E's I talk about. So I focus on energy because I can have people live a comfortable life, being, watching a lot of video, stuff, or no, that's not my purpose, or media. I'm not going to be a comedian. So I have, after I look at the overarching purposes, I say, hey, what am I good at? I'm good at science, I'm good at invention. So I do these things which are, helping people to be self-sufficient in energy and know how to use energy. And then the central one would be how to, do things like, protect the environment, have a smaller footprint of carbon dioxide, and not be polluting or clean up the environment. And the third purpose is education, because I see education as very key in promoting the first two, these three purposes, the for energy and also for protecting the environment. I need to have the third component, which is education, to bring people to, well, in a sense, that's called marketing, okay? So education is part of my marketing strategy. So these are the, important things which are full of purpose, okay? So this could be applied to invention, because invention is purposeful. I call it purpose-driven invention, not skill-driven invention. There are a lot of people who learn one particular skill. They may know about fluid dynamics, and then they try to solve every problem in the world through the skill. I don't think that's a good idea. The important thing is to define your purpose and then acquire the skill to do the job. Alexander Graham Bell was trying to invent the telephone, and so he went to talk to Professor Henry. He was at that time as Princeton, or later in Smithsonian, and he's an expert in electromagnetism. He invented the induction coil, and eventually, when Alexander Graham Bell asked Professor Henry that he doesn't know too much about the use of an induction coil and a magnet, he doesn't know the theory. And what the professor said was, acquire that, learn that, okay? So you always are driven by purpose, and when there are skills that you need to solve the problem, you acquire that skill. And eventually he invented the microphone using a magnet that's inside a coil, so that as the magnet tied to a diaphragm moves up and down, then it would induce a current through the coil, and then the current would go over a twisted pair of wire to the other side, where he has the same device where you have another magnet being driven by the magnetism of the current from the other end, moving the magnet, and is tied to another diaphragm, so you can hear the sound. So it's important really to learn. Forget about what you know. Just ask the problem what the purpose is, and then afterwards, acquire the skill that you need. For example, my favorite examples are in the United States. We had during the Second World War, our purpose was to defeat the Nazi Germany war machine. And so in order to do that, we create our own war machine, which is the Manhattan Project. So if the purpose is defeating Nazi Germany, then the mission would be the Manhattan Project, and then you try to get good people, mostly people who are extremely smart, physicists, but then it turned out that most of the problem are engineering problem, metallurgy, that sort of thing. And so the scientists, who are mostly physicists, would have to learn new skill. All right, they even have to start thinking about using a computer to simulate a nuclear explosion. So that's the first example. The second example could very well be, when the Soviet Union at that time sent a man to space through and then the United States through President Kennedy say, hey, we define a new purpose, which is to send a man to the moon. And then they created the NASA, the Apollo project, to send a man to the moon before the end of the decade. So there's a very well-defined purpose. Actually, the purpose was, that we need to go into space. It's not so much to beat the Soviet Union to the moon first, but that is become a very well-defined mission. And the mission, they staffed the mission through a lot of very smart people who acquired the skill then to send a man to the moon, and they did in 1969 on Apollo 11. All right, so full of purpose. Now the next one is full of faith. Full of faith.